Welcome to the Conquer Your Battlefield podcast, where we come together to discuss some of the more significant struggles and metaphorical battlefields that we faced along our journeys and share some insight on how we've conquered them. I'm JD McGibney, and today I'll be chatting with the hardworking, the inspiring, guitar-slaying, and ever-loving family man, Mr. Brandon Cook of the bands The Loyal Order and Black and Blue. How you doing, Brandon?
Doing really good, man. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to see you. I'm glad that we're getting a chance to chat after, what feels like an eternity.
Yeah, right. Man, I can't remember the last time we saw each other in the same room.
The last time we saw each other in the same room, I think, was NAMM 2019. So
did we see each other in 2020? Or oh my gosh.
I know, right? It's crazy that it's been that long. It's just like this entire year and a half is just like flown by.
Yep.
Well, today we're going to be talking about emotional repression and the expectations and realities of it in regards to men and toxic masculinity. Yep. Repressed emotions are feelings a person unconsciously avoids. A common expectation in our society is that men in particular should avoid sharing their feelings because it's seen as a sign of weakness. Thankfully, speaking from my own personal opinion, it would seem that this idea has come under some intense scrutiny within more recent years. Emotional repression can factor into mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression. According to a 2018 article by Dr. Henry A. Montero entitled Depression in Men, the Cycle of Toxic Masculinity, about 6 million men in the United States alone suffer from depression, and the number of young boys showing signs of depression has risen between 4.5% to 6%. Oftentimes, as a child, I personally have heard things like, man up, be a man, don't be a pussy, what are you, a girl, or take it like a man, and so on and so forth. As I'm sure you have as well, Brandon, and I'm sure many people who are watching this. Never.
No, I have a lot, actually.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
There are countless studies that show that when a person represses their emotions, that their body and behavior react to that. Often people develop depression, anxiety, or a slew of other conditions. Their bodies often begin to ache. They're always sore. They become sick easily, and they become sick pretty often as well. The very idea that in our culture we have a distinction between men and women, that women are allowed to and encouraged to express their emotions, while men are taught just the opposite of that, just blows my mind. So, Brandon, what was your life like living by this philosophy, and what was the moment that you realized that things could be different?
Well, that's a really good question. The life before that moment was really, it was one of sort of like this is the first phrase that popped to mind. It's quiet desperation, like it's like constantly hoping somebody can read you, constantly hoping someone's going to set some time aside for you, or constantly hoping that someone's going to do something for you without you having to ask for it, like especially when, I don't want to point fingers or name names of who did what to me or whatever, because, that stuff is private. However, there were forces in my life that were, really oppressive to me, like that. I mean, I couldn't express myself really in any way, shape, or form. That was my life,
like you were specifically like told or like forced to not express yourself. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, it's like, well, I feel sad. Well, why do you feel sad? Don't feel sad. What are you doing? Like, oh, don't be a baby. Why are you being such a baby? And it's like judgment is cast, like from the moment you speak up, or like, it's like, you ask for something for breakfast and then, somebody else in the house eats it without talking to you about it. And you're like, well, hey, that was supposed to be for me. Well, why are you being such a baby about this? Like that kind of thing, and it's like always, that I think it, before I had another like very close family member apologize to me, it was like, I can't remember that happening much in my house growing up, things like that.
It's crazy to think about it. Like the fact that like you're pointing out stuff like you expressed, you weren't just flat out saying you were upset, you were disappointed. You're just saying, hey, this was supposed to be like this way. And the fact it's you saying what you said was like alluding to you being unhappy, but it was very indirect. But even that
Yeah.
was shot down. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's just the idea is just so ingrained in us that like it seems like any sign of you having any kind of feelings whatsoever, at least towards like a negative aspect, where just kind of like, hey, why do you feel this way?
Oh no, I mean, it could be even if I was really happy about something.
Really?
It's like, you're like super excited about something. Why are you being such a geek about this? Or,
Ah,
oh man, aren't we so happy today? It's like, I didn't know that was a bad thing.
it's like
You know,
it's such
that
a
kind of,
weird it's such a weird thing, because like hearing you say this, I there definitely have been moments in my life personally, and then other people that I've known growing up who've had similar things, and like hearing their family members, my family members, or just like watching kids together, on the playground or like in junior high or high school reacting the same way. It just like it didn't click
mhm.
until like adulthood, and it's just like, wait, why is this?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure that those messages that I took on about that, early in life, I probably did that to people too. I can think of certain instances, but I probably did it more than what I'm thinking of, because that was
it just became
that,
second nature at that point.
yeah, exactly. When you're in your 30s and this has been happening to you since you were like before you remember, it's like,
It's like
you
you
know,
just get up and you
uh,
brush your teeth every morning. It's just like you don't even remember doing it. You're just like,
yeah, I mean, imagine shaming a baby for crying, or
it's
like a
such a weird
toddler.
thing.
Or the word martyr was thrown around, and it's like, I'm, before I actually had somebody like validate a feeling for me in my living space, I was one of the first people that really validated my life and my experience was my friend Will. And he was just like, he asked me, he's like, what happened to you? And I was like, because we had an interchange where he was playing with his kid and it got a little bit rough, but they have a fun rough house style.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, you need to chill your kid, man. And he kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And so he took me aside one day and he was like, so what happened to you? And I just like kind of, I'm not sure what you mean. And he kind of poked and prodded a little bit. And I told him what some things that happened. And he's just like, yeah, I don't know I don't know what you call that, but if you saw that happen to my son, you'd call CPS on me, right? And I was like, well, yeah. And he goes, so do you think that's abuse? And I'm like, hmm,
It's
things
so
like that.
it's so strange how like growing up we live in uh environments, and it basically like if we just were born into something, we
Yeah.
experience it, like that's all we know. So like if something happens to just be not quote unquote normal, or something is abusive, we don't register it when it's happening to us, because we're just like, oh, it is what it is, and it just happens all the time. It's like we get desensitized to it. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that your friend uh put it in a different perspective, where like you told him what happened, and it sounds like you were just like matter of fact, like, oh, it's just, it is what it is. But then he
Yeah.
put it into like a perspective of like, if you saw the same thing happening to a small child, to your best friend's like child, you'd be like, motherfucker, I'm calling CPS.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I might react physically to protect the child too. It's like, that's, that's, I think that's what he noticed in me, is that I was real edgy. Like, like
Yeah.
something wasn't, that I picked up something that wasn't happening. And I was projecting my experience onto others. And I mean, that's some of how toxic masculinity, like you get so repressed with your emotional and you're like, you're not allowed to express anger, technically you're not allowed to express any emotion, but once you blow up, it's like, well, that's what men do. So that's
or even uh I think nowadays, more particularly, it's like if if a man does blow up, it's automatically seen as, oh, how dare you do that? Like, you have no right to do that. And
yeah,
it's just like, bringing up the idea of emotional repression and like that feeding into toxic masculinity. It kind of just seems like you're not allowed to express yourself, but then when you can't take enough and you explode, it's like, obviously you should never explode and like take your anger out on another human being, physically or
sure,
emotionally, period. Like, there's no excuse. But like,
yeah,
it seems like there's not understanding with the other side of the coin, if that makes any sense. And it
yeah.
sounds
I mean,
like and
I've
it sounds
actually been in romantic relationships where the person is actually literally doing things like gaslighting and stuff like
Oof.
that. Things that I've learned about since then that I learned were actually those things: gaslighting and like, abuse and like, you know, neglect and all kinds of things. And having a counselor say, hey, that's what that is. What you're describing to me is gaslighting. I wasn't there, but, and then, so, but then when you do explode, when you're going through this because you've learned to repress your emotions around these sort of toxic people,
Mhm.
then you explode and they go, look, you're abusive.
And they
And
turn
it's
it
like,
around on you.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's
And a lot of
it,
people do that, people that don't have boundaries. And that's one of the things that repression actually does. It teaches you not to have boundaries. And so that's why people end up exploding a lot, because their boundaries are not in place. The first sign of that, that toxic abuse or whatever, whether it's male, female, transgender, or whatever, those anybody can be, narcissistic or abusive, anybody. And it doesn't matter what race, creed, religion, or whatever they come from. um, and they can be that thing, and it can cause you to it can, if you're sort of repressed about your boundaries and how well you set boundaries with other people, it can lead you to this exploding behavior. And usually that's the person repressing these other things: hide, repress, or deny.
I
you
think
know
I think it's fascinating that you bring up the idea of boundaries. Boundaries, you know, as you just mentioned, are very important to have in any relationship, in any dynamic.
yeah,
And you know, basically they're meant not to restrict another human being, but to set up, you know, boundaries for yourself, to protect yourself. This way you don't end up in a situation where you are triggered towards negative emotions, or you are triggered to end up leading down the path of blowing up. And I
hmm,
think
right,
feeding into the whole emotional repression, toxic masculinity thing, the idea that a man would have boundaries, I think feeds into that idea of like, oh, men, a real man doesn't get affected by things. They're okay with stuff. Like, they wouldn't have these kind of boundaries. When
yeah,
it just that idea alone is just crazy, because all human beings are human beings. We all have emotions. We all have feelings. We all have, you know, a way that we express ourselves, the way that we want to express ourselves. So if you're
yeah,
ever in a situation where you don't feel comfortable, you should be like, you should just be allowed to express, hey, I don't feel comfortable with A, B, and C. And again, the idea of setting that boundary isn't to say, hey, stop doing that thing to another person. It's going, I don't feel comfortable with that. So I'm either going to remove myself from the situation, or I'm going to, just don't do that around me. And we could
yeah.
still, do, E, F, and G.
100%. Yeah, I agree with you. Like that's really how the boundary gets set. It's like you control yourself. If you're making efforts to control another person's behavior, that's basically codependency, you
That is
know.
emotional abuse.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, that's where it starts. I mean, it depends. It's like if somebody's coming at you with some negative controlling behavior, and then you attempt to control them, you have now engaged in an abusive dynamic,
Yeah.
right? Because most of the time it takes two to tango. You can't just dance alone. I mean, you could, but
You
that
look weird.
when you're in, yeah, it would look weird. Come on, man up. Dance alone. No. But seriously,
Real
like
men don't
that
use shoes.
dynamic starts to interact interplay with other person's issues. And I read this book by John Gottman. I can't remember the title of it right now, but and one of the things that they recommend if you start to feel triggered is to just go, hey, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit upset right now. And I don't think I'm having a good, I just need some time to like cool off for a minute. We should have this discussion. And then the book says he and his wife, they're both researchers in how to make good relationships work. They need at least 20 minutes. I mean, sometimes it's a couple days before you can talk about it, but there's a difference between that and stonewalling, like going, hey, I need time, versus just you're shut down, you're not talking,
Yeah.
you know.
Stonewalling is just like, you're basically giving someone the silent treatment on purpose. Whereas if you
Yeah.
say, hey, I need to step away, that's going, hey, you're recognizing that the situation is getting emotional. You're not able to like be rational about it. So you're like, let's stop for now and come back to this.
Yeah. And, really learning how to do that is a very key step to creating an emotional boundary. It's like, because the premise of that is that like when you're flooded emotionally, your brain doesn't function in a logical manner. Like
No,
they
it does
say,
not.
men are logical and women are emotional. It's like, no, when either sex is angry or upset or emotional, they're not gonna function in logic.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter who you are,
And
either,
that goes for any
any
emotion. That goes
gender.
for like anger or love, one of the
Yeah, totally. Yeah, if you're too overwhelmed with like love emotion, making a really good decision for your life is tough.
yeah, no,
Like,
love oftentimes will cause people to ignore some very vibrant red flags in other people because you're just like, you know what, it's fine. It's
yeah,
so like you just said, emotions make you do stupid shit.
yeah. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like repression is kind of like the Wile E. Coyote Acme rubber band. You know,
I love
if
the
you're like,
analogy.
if you're just keep pulling it back and pulling it back, if somebody triggers your love emotion,
It's gonna fucking
you
snap.
you snap and you go all the way, and it's crazy, and you're like in this love thing, and it's like, oh my God. But then once you kind of calm down from that, then you start that
Going back.
repression thing again. And then somebody triggered, like you're holding on to all this emotion, all this energy. And then that same person that you're totally in love with is doing all this abusive stuff. Then you fly off again.
So I have a question to get a little bit more like into like your personal experiences. Like
Sure.
growing up as like a teenager, how do you feel that your behavior uh was represented as a teenager growing up when you're trying to like discover who you are as a person, but also dealing with this habit of emotional repression and like this idea of toxic masculinity?
Yeah. My teenage years, like the way I sort of learned to emote was music and lyrics. Like I how it manifested itself was me writing a lot of like death metal songs and stuff. Like I was writing songs around the first wave of death metal in like 1990, 1989, and like wanting to be like Dave Mustaine or like James Hetfield, or, and really express, just be able to like, I'm pissed off, and just say it in a song in a way that was like connected with other people, and I'd come home after school every single day and jam to Megadeth and Metallica records for like 4 or 5 hours. I get all my homework done, and like still have time to do all that. And it was like, it was my only real outlet. I went to the gym, I played soccer, I did all kinds of stuff. But those kinds of things actually like encourage that sort of like repression, that a lot of those, like
Like the
modern.
sports you're saying?
Yeah, it's like you can only show emotion when you win or lose, not all the things in between. And it's like when you win, it's happy, and you can cry even because it's so happy. It's like tears of joy. I won. I fought a hard battle. But up until that point,
No
no,
emotion.
no emotion, and, you know, I was lucky to have pretty good coaches that were, able to connect with me and talk about stuff. But like, I remember him, his name's Brett, and he was like a really great coach, one of my favorite coaches of all time. And he just like he was really supportive. We had a mixed team where it was boys and girls, and
Is this for
one of the
soccer?
yeah, the best player on our team was a girl, and he'd put her in there to like kick our asses. It was so good, and we learned how to deal with a different kind of adversity on our team because she was so amazing. And, Roberta is still an amazing woman. But like she was able, she taught us a lot about how to, interact with women, when we were in like 12, 13 years old, and, what was appropriate. And he kind of, you know, talked us through like certain dynamics. It's like, when we were all just young, horny boys, it was like, no, man, you guys can't act like that, or she's on your team. Like, you don't talk like that to her. Don't think like that with her. She's
It's
your,
like treat her like, respectfully, like a human being,
yeah,
which
like
is a
she's,
very important, lesson in
yeah,
life,
she's
period.
your teammate. Sorry, what?
It's just a very important lesson in life, period.
Yeah, absolutely. Like she's your teammate. She's a person. And we really learned how, like, one of the guys ended up dating her on the team. But when I when I played with her, I treated her like the leader, which she was. She was clearly the leader of the team. So it's like, when you have somebody that's going to score, you pass to Roberta, so she can take it in there, because she just had this
She could do
ability.
it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure she was a championship softball player later in life too, and
Oh wow,
she's
she's very
really good.
athletic. It sounds.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, and it taught us a lot. I feel grateful for that experience of having to, you know, learn how to get your ass handed to you by a powerful woman, and you know, and then walk it off and give her a high five because she's on your team.
It
It was
sounds
really,
like, as a teenager, you definitely had a really, you had a really just a good core group of people, especially like on your soccer team that you were around, from Roberta to, I think their coach's name was Ian. Is that right?
Brett.
Brett. So it was Brett. I don't know where I get Ian from. So
That's
you
okay.
had like, Brett and Roberta, like, were really influential to how you grew as a person. It seems. I'm assuming there are, other people on the team as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely those were just ones that were standing out, that taught me a lot. And I was able to, like, one of the things I was really able to do in my teenage years was create a more healthy environment away from, home life and stuff. Because they were just, baby boomers that, grew up with abusive parents too.
So
And
it sounds like, forgive me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a lot of the negative influence came from, specifically, like your nuclear home life. Is that correct?
yeah,
And then
definitely.
it sounds like you gravitated towards music, which kind of started as like your anchor to kind of like keep you grounded, and like your emotional outlet, your release valve, so to speak. And
Oh
then
yeah.
you were able to find outside influence and outside groups to basically alleviate and get you away from that negative environment. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't really spend all that much time at home. If I was at home, I was in my room, and if I wasn't at home, I was at soccer practice or in the gym or like at a friend's house, and oftentimes, like, I would sit there talking with their parents, and they'd be like, you're such a grown-up kid. Where do you get that? And part of that was from like being a latchkey kid from like the second grade, like, I spent a lot of time with me and my brother, growing up, and like trying to figure out how this life works with our parent. My dad wasn't living with us anymore. My parents got divorced, and my mom was at work. So, we figured out a lot of stuff, and we had to do a lot of negotiating on our own with adults and school administrators and teachers and stuff like that. So, as we got older, you know, we had to be little adults. Me and my brother, we were like,
It's really crazy how, like, kids that come from emotionally abusive households tend to just have they tend to have this air of, I guess, what people would call old souls. It's just like you said. It seems like the idea that kids have to grow up sooner because they're dealing with these higher levels of trauma from such an early age that they start to see things differently. They don't necessarily just like, dwell on like the fun and the playtime all the time, which I'm sure there was like fun and playtime when you were a kid. Cause you're a kid, you're like, I'm just gonna, play with stuff and put stuff in my mouth.
Yeah, sure.
But like the idea that like, I don't know, what you said made me think it's just, it seems like such a clear uh clue when you have like a bunch of kids that are like fun and happy, and then you have like one or two that are like these old souls, quote unquote. It seems so obvious in hindsight when you go back and you talk to them, but like sometimes it's hard in the moment as like their kids to pick up on things because they don't know any better, so they just say, oh yeah, mom and dad, whatever, it's just how things are. But like you
Yeah.
talk to them as an adult, like when you were talking with your friend, you had this realization like, oh shit, I was dealing with abuse as a child.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the like that I noticed like one of the ways like emotional repression like sort of rears its head is that old soul thing, because as a young child you're kind of parenting. They actually call it parentified child.
Yep.
Like the adult is having this intense emotional sort of tantrum reaction to
Yeah.
something you did, and like you're expected to sort of be a grown up and act like an adult and like, like, why don't you grow up, and then so like you're standing there like having
Or
this emotional straight
yeah,
face and
and
trying to
oftentimes you have
care for their
kids,
emotions.
you know, kids when they're like younger, like before they start like questioning their parents, like they often feel a sense of responsibility too, because it's like they're your parents, they're raising you. It's like you don't want them to be angry, you don't want them to be upset, so you feel
Right.
that strong sense of family, like, oh, what can I do to like fix this, how can I help too?
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think adding on to the whole the emotional repression, and like, you mentioned that parents coming from like another set of like their parents being like emotionally abusive. I think the idea of emotional repression adds into that loop of just having a series of like families just like abusing their children, because specifically on like the side of men, we're expected not to, or have been in the past been expected not to express our feelings. So there are often these times where like the wily coyote rubber band just snaps, but it happens so frequently that you just start taking it out on the people closest to you that you see
Yeah.
every day, which are literally the people you live with. Like, and if you have kids, it would, end up being them.
Yeah.
So I'm, hearing all this, like I'm extremely happy. I'm really proud that you were able to like recognize all this and break that cycle, which sounds like it was going through like generation after generation. I don't know how
Yeah.
far back it goes, but the fact that you are sitting here right now aware of everything, I think that's a very powerful, it's a very powerful thing that you've done. And you having this conversation, I think shows a lot of strength.
Thank you, man. Well, I've been learning to have this conversation for about 10 years now. Like I've been going to counseling and doing various like therapies to build my infrastructure internally. Like they say, work on you. Like do you, that whole you do you thing
Yeah.
when you're going through like, some sort of like changing event like a divorce, or like you lose your house or you lose your job or something. And
Something highly emotional.
yeah, they say you do you, and what that means to me, like what I've sort of interpreted that is like focus on yourself, focus on how you handle this situation, take care of yourself, learn what caused this to happen, take care. Like any relationship is basically a 50-50. You got your 100% of your 50%, and that other person has 100% of their 50%. And it's no longer your responsibility. When you're enmeshed, a healthy relationship is sort of interdependent, but like an unhealthy relationship becomes this sort of codependent thing where you're like taking care of 90% of someone else's life,
Which
and
is
they're
totally unhealthy. And
yeah, and they're sort of expecting it, or the vice versa. You might be the one that's only taking care of 10% of your life. And typically, because a codependent relationship works that way, whether it's a work relationship or a interpersonal romantic relationship, that other person starts picking up stuff that you're not handling in your own life. you know that's why it's a dynamic, because you're over there like handling their life, and they go, look, you got to deal with your own life. Oh man, I've been in so many of those relationships that it just it kind of creeps me out knowing what I did.
Yeah.
And but
It's
what the
crazy the kind of like enlightenment that like going to therapy can have. You said you've been going for 10 years. Is that right?
10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had
Like
a really wonderful male therapist because I felt like the men in my life were a little bit more absent, and I needed somebody specifically male to learn how to have proper boundaries as a man, and
interesting.
he ended up recommending uh recommending that I go to something called Mankind Project, which is
Mhm.
the Nude Warrior training weekend. And it's it's just basically a society of men learning how to, wounded men, learning how to interact with the world in a more healthy way. Part of it's a reaction to women saying, hey, you guys got to take care of yourselves. And the other part is, just realizing that,
There's a
you
better way
know,
to be
yeah, there's
behaving in
a
society
yeah, and once you
and a
go through
healthier way
this,
too.
yeah, absolutely, learning how to deal with anger in a productive way. And everybody gets angry, but like there's a difference between abuse and anger, and
Oh yeah.
a lot of times people feel that it's the same thing. And it's
Mm-mm.
like, no, I just said I was angry.
Yeah.
I didn't say
Abuse is,
you're X, Y,
you
and Z.
abuse is someone making an excuse to take their anger and their frustration out on someone else, whereas anger is just an emotion.
Yeah,
Anger, like any other emotion, comes in like waves. You can be angry at like, oh man, I dropped my pen in the middle of like writing something. Like it's frustration. You could be angry like, oh, I hit my toe against like the wall accidentally. That's anger. You could be angry that someone lied to you or that you're having a heated conversation. But there's different
yeah,
levels of anger. But at no point is there an excuse to react and like lash out at someone or something because you're
sure.
angry.
Right, yeah, and that's kind of what, like, that's kind of the way that the Mankind Project helps you learn to deal with things through various processes that they've come up with, that they borrowed from, like a various different therapeutic modalities, and like cultural cultural things that they've, borrowed from different cultural backgrounds and stuff. And you know I think it was one of the most profound experiences of my life to go through that weekend, because I never had interactions with men like that, and
What
you know
what exactly was it like on this weekend? Like what were kind of the experiences that you had?
well, because of the nature of the therapeutic nature of it, I'm not allowed to like divulge.
Yeah,
I
you
can
don't have
just
to. We don't have to go into like specifics.
what it did for me, like it allowed me some to air 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 grievances that I had with people in my life that I couldn't actually tell to them, whether they
Gotcha.
were like, passed away or just like
Not
not able to hear it or whatever, and it allowed me to like see that what I was going through and what had been going through was like negative for me, and my experience was valid. And learning how to validate that experience and learning how to take responsibility for who I am, what I've experienced in life, and know come up with a plan for myself that sort of equates to growth. And then the other part is like accountability,
mm,
like doing the things that you say you're going to do. One of the biggest parts about Mankind Project is accountability. Like I'm going to show up here at I'm going to show up here today at 11 o'clock, or yeah, 11 o'clock. And
2 o'clock for me.
yeah, right, 2 o'clock for you. So if you don't make it, or you show up early, and like you're like kind of getting pissed because someone's not on time when you're early. It's like, well, you didn't say you were going to be there at 10:50. You said you were going to be there at 11. Why are you upset?
Yeah.
And like taking accountability for the choice you made that led you to be late or early or feeling angry, or over whatever. So like example, if I showed up at 11:20 and I was supposed to be here at 11 o'clock, what did I make more important leading up to that thing that I knew was going to be happening at 11 o'clock that put me 20 minutes behind schedule.
Interesting.
And that process of learning how to make the thing you said you're going to do important, or put it at a place that relates to its importance in your day or in your week or whatever your life is. So if for example, I was like, I knew I had to, like, yesterday, one of my things was I showed up a little late to my meeting, and I had made working out very important that day. And I've been trying to make sure I have all my things in the day. And even though I was in it, to me, an account with what I chose to do,
Mm-hmm.
it put me behind the schedule. So I had to talk with, kind of run a process and explain, not explain, but like
Are you saying like run a
calibrate my.
process? Are you saying like run a process like with yourself and like talk about it, or?
Well, it's always with yourself, but like the
Okay,
men in the group, they kind of run a process with you, and
gotcha.
talk with you about it and ask you how you feel and like what you did, and like maybe if you're open to it, you're allowed to like receive advice from other men,
Mhm.
stuff like that. And a lot of times advice isn't even really like welcome, and you're allowed to like set a boundary, like, I don't want any advice about this, thank you. And
Mhm.
they're supposed to remain quiet about it. And
It sounds
because,
like a big part of this whole the therapy, just breaking it down, is
yeah.
teaching the people that go that you're allowed to have these feelings, and that like if you have feelings, it teaches you to express those feelings and allow yourself to actually feel them, as opposed to just kind of like lock them in a little box somewhere and like forget about it until like it becomes toxic and venomous and explosive.
Yep, exactly. Like you have a feeling about, like, one of the things that we talk about is this thing called a clearing. It's like if you have a charge with another person, you bring it to you're allowed to run a process with that person. So you talk about what happened, you talk about your judgments about what happened, talk about your feelings about what happened, and then you talk about where was the earliest time that you had this experience where someone did this to you and you're feeling this anger. What does it remind you of?
That's interesting. So it takes the what happened like in the present, but it also, so it takes what happens in the present, creates an open dialogue to say, hey, this event is affecting me this way, and then you're explaining the root
It's
of
actually
your
not a
feeling.
dialogue. It's
Dialogue.
all about your projection.
Oh,
The other person doesn't really speak.
gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
It's your charge, it's your thing that you're dealing with. They might have totally not even known they were doing anything, like they just said the word fart or something and you got pissed off. It could be like something really like innocuous,
Gotcha.
and it upsets you, and they had no intention of doing anything, whatever.
Mhm.
uh, but then you have to kind of like, after the where you first saw it and how it affected you at that early point in your life, then you have to show how you do it to other people.
So basically, you put that person on the spot, explain and backtrack, and then it makes you like analyze yourself. Oh wait, I do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Interesting.
if somebody
Interesting.
is late and you're upset with them, technically, like if they broke an agreement, that becomes an accountability issue for them.
Mhm.
But if there's no broken agreement and you have this sort of secret agreement with yourself and you're upset with them for being late,
Mhm.
like now it's like, well, I didn't say that there was a boundary and we were supposed to be here at this time, but I viewed them as late. And I
Gotcha.
do this to people all the time. I do this thing where I'm like constantly making like, secret agreements with myself. And the reason I do that is because I see myself as less important. So I don't speak up and set a boundary, or something like that.
Gotcha.
That's for me, that's a common theme. Like, I get upset about something with somebody and they haven't made an agreement with me,
And you
but
haven't talked to them about.
yeah, I'm hoping that they have, or something like that. It's something I work on.
So that
And
goes back to I think what you said like at the very beginning when we first started talking. This idea of you built up this habit of just expecting and hoping for someone to just read your mind basically and just know what it is that you're thinking.
Yeah, and a lot, that's one of like, that's a very common sort of toxic thought that people have, is that someone should just know. I'm not gonna, if you don't know, I'm just not gonna tell you.
Oh God,
Like I've
I
heard
hate that.
wives and boyfriends and husbands and boy, all the different types of people. It's like, have you talked to them about this? Well, if they don't know, I'm not gonna tell them.
I think that's a very it's a very interesting thing that you're bringing up, because I know I've definitely heard this as a stereotype, and like you know, poking fun at like relationships where like it's often said that like the woman in the relationship just does that and they just expect the man to know. And I think that
Yeah,
was also like an idea that like feeds into this whole like uh toxic masculinity thing. So like if you're constantly being told by society and like the stereotype, and even though it's poking fun, like
yeah,
I think a lot of people take that to heart, where it's like, oh, I should just know, and then you have that internalized and you're like, oh, so they should also just know.
yeah. Yeah, both parties. I mean, like in any situation where there's a communication gap, both parties are doing that to some level,
Yeah.
like,
Communication is key in any relationship, whether it's romantic, friendship, family, acquaintance. You have to be able to
yeah,
communicate, and you should communicate, obviously respectfully.
yeah. And one of the things that happens, I've kind of noticed in my studies that, like, you know, men sort of have this almost toxic level of accountability forced upon them. That's
Mm,
like they're supposed to be on time at work. They're supposed to earn the bread. They're supposed to do this. They're supposed to take care of the wife. And it's not the wife's expectations, it's a societal
mhm.
expectation.
And
And
it's just
then,
something that's internalized from like
yeah,
when, men are like, we little boys.
I think it's more typical in like cisgender families and stuff like that. And then, like, what happens with the women in those situations, because the man is sort of hoarding all responsibility and accountability, the woman doesn't really ever learn to have accountability. So the guy is now pointing fingers at her. She doesn't have an accountability. She just expects me to know to do all this stuff and blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, they're
You've
just
you
doing
you
what.
two have developed that that's the relationship. You have to
Yeah,
communicate.
exactly,
I,
exactly.
I
And
I'm curious. It sounds like you've definitely done a lot of soul searching, for lack of a better word. You've done a lot of like uh inner looking, inner examination. What what was like the exact thing that triggered you to be like, hey, maybe I should do a lot of this. Maybe I should look at some of this. I should like
um,
examine myself. I should go to therapy.
well, my mom gave me this book. One of the things was, like, my friend Will, like he just it was very shortly after that conversation we had at the beginning, that we just talked about.
Mhm.
I had a pretty bad emotional reaction with a loved one, because they were doing that, one of those things of not seeing me and not hearing me for who I am, and hearing and seeing my needs.
Yeah,
And
that you were
I
not communicating.
yeah, they said, "Oh, shut the fuck up," or something like that. And I just fucking went nuts. I like, it was that he had scratched the nerve, and then that nerve was this big gaping wound, because I was feeling a little weird all week. And
Mm.
then that person pulled the scab off,
And it just like it
and
was
it
the
just was like,
the elevator door from The Shining.
oh yeah, oh my god, it was so bad. And that person and I had a very long conversation that day, and I was so overwhelmed with, like, backlogged emotions. I was
Mhm.
just crying, sobbing, and like going through this thing. And pretty shortly after that, I started really pairing out some, you know, certain types of relationships in my life. My wife and I had developed a very toxic bond together,
Mhm.
my ex-wife. And I mean, I made a decision that I was going to leave the relationship, because you know I think she was still comfortable in the way she wanted to be, and I realized I couldn't change it, so I left.
No, I
And
think that's very important. It's we are never able to we are not able to change anyone, nor is it our responsibility to change anyone.
exactly. And learning to be responsible for myself and not try to help her with everything all the time.
Mhm.
I had to I had realized I'd given up a lot of myself in my marriage, And, not through any fault of her own, she was going through whatever she was going through. But for me, I had my codependence. I put my responsibility onto making sure her life was going great. But meanwhile, my musical life and my creative life and my business life and my emotional life was going to hell. And,
So you put all the focus on her, making sure she was happy, and neglected everything that you wanted to do and anything that made you happy and gave you a balance, it sounds like.
yeah, exactly. And, I started therapy pretty soon after that. About, it was about, once we finally got divorced, it was about 6 months, and I started real therapy. And uh, it it started right away, like putting up boundaries, and like it messed with my abandonment issues and like all that stuff, because when I'd put a boundary up, that other person would just ditch, you
Ooh.
know, and I had a lot of people around like that, that's like, oh, Brandon's putting a boundary, fuck him, I
It
don't need
sounds
him
like
anymore.
those boundaries were like, I'm assuming, cutting out like negative, influential people.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it did. And, sometimes it's like that other person's dealing with abandonment issues, but other times
Mhm.
they're like out to hurt, and, the ones that are dealing with their own issues and actually dealing with them, they'll actually, like, when you put your boundary up, they might get upset with you. But at the
But
end of
they'll
the day, they'll
respect it.
come and they'll say, I'm sorry, and you know what? I know what I did these things, and I can see how that upset you, because that would upset me too.
Mhm.
And what else do you need from me? Like, and it's like, well, I don't really
Yeah.
need anything, but let's
Just
let's
don't
kind of
do
talk.
this thing.
Yeah, let's just talk about this dynamic a little bit more and make sure that we understand each other. And that there's not a lot of people just don't have the bandwidth right now, because I think society has, even like in news and like, the
Mhm.
pundits in the political world and all that stuff, they're just like constantly abusive. I mean, like, if you listen to any news pundit that, like, and they have a caller that disagrees with them, they'll
Oh
just
my
call
God.
him an idiot and hang up on him,
Oh yeah, no, especially like with news media and people doing like interviews, quote unquote, or like just
Yeah,
watching like political debates like that. It just gives
yeah,
me anxiety.
yeah. And I think that, yeah, it does it. And my anxiety definitely like
You're just
gets
like,
triggered.
oh God, just like talk about the thing that they're talking about and just stop attacking each other
Yeah, yeah.
verbally.
The ad hominem attacks, right? Yeah, and the so like it was around 2011 that I started doing that therapy with my therapist, and it was immediately affecting my relationship with my daughter in a positive way. And like, we were
That's
having,
fantastic.
like, when we were living together, like part of the week,
Mm.
I noticed that she wasn't really reacting to what I asked her to do. And I got upset one day, and it was like, she went to school, and we had like a thing, and I hugged her, and we apologized, and held each other for a second before she went to school. And then I went directly from there to counseling and talked about what happened. And I was just like, I don't want my daughter to ever tell me to fuck off. And he goes, I hate to break it to you, but she just did. And that's why she's doing that thing that that, because you're having like a control dynamic right there. And he brought it right to the surface of, like, what was going on between us. And, it had a lot to do with like the wake up cycle and how to get a kid out of bed and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Man, when you can like make those very everyday moments, those mundane everyday things that everyone does and most people get annoyed about, if you can make those things sweet and gentle every single day, like making dinner,
It goes a
don't
long way.
attack somebody because, you might say, hey, that's burning, but you don't go, oh, you idiot, you're burning the food.
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference.
It's like shit
you know
happens, accidents happen, but you don't need to place blame and make someone feel like they're being attacked.
right, yeah. And, sometimes people get really upset about, like, when, even if you're just like going, hey, sweetheart, your eggs are burning, and they hear and like project judgment on what you're saying, and that creates that dynamic too.
I
So
think it's the way you phrased it too. I think is really important because you're just stating a fact. It's like, oh, your eggs are burning, or the eggs are burning, not you're burning the eggs. If you
yeah,
say you're doing this, it could come off as accusatory. Whereas if you just say the eggs are burning or your eggs are burning, it's just you're stating a fact, saying they're burning.
right, exactly. And I think for myself, as I learned to communicate better, speaking about a fact rather than a judgment, like what someone is doing, you speak in I statements, speak in generals
Mhm.
instead of like you. It starts to create, and my daughter and I, we have that very down pat. Like when I wake her up in the morning, I sit on the bed and I rub her on the back and I go, sweetheart, it's time to get up, even if we're late.
Mhm.
And I go, hey, we're late. We need to get moving. Do you mind if I open your window so that'll help you wake up faster? Things like that. If, and we just have this really smooth, killer communication style. There are times when she gets upset with me.
Oh, she's a human
And
being. Like she has emotions.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I try to like recognize those. I go, hey, you're really upset right now. Do you need a second to calm down
And it's
before we talk?
really good that you've been doing this for like a decade, literally, and your
Yeah.
daughter is a teenager now, right?
Yeah, she's 16.
Yeah. So like, you started with the training from when she's like a little kid. So like that right there, I think is extremely helpful. It's such a good, such a good thing, and I think the fact that you're focusing on that speaks volumes to your abilities of being like a fantastic parent. By the way,
Yeah, well, thank you so much, man.
you're
It's
welcome.
I'm definitely not perfect. I have my moments where I still, you know, mistake control for parenting, like,
Mhm.
so she might be doing something that's somehow I'd sticking in my craw, whatever it is that she's doing that's upsetting me. And I have to take responsibility for that instead of for her. Because I have to take responsibility for my feelings before I start telling her to change her behavior.
Yeah, like
You know, I,
there's definitely a
sometimes
difference
it's
between
like,
teaching a kid like and guiding them how to be like a good person, and just
yeah,
not liking where they put the way they put their shoes away, and like when they're done with them, like two completely different things. It's like, okay,
yeah,
don't leave the shoes like in the doorway so we don't trip,
yeah,
but like whatever, just as long as no one dies.
yeah. And that can really work with any relationship. I mean, even like
Yeah.
if you have it worked right and you have enough kind of, intimacy and boundaries right with your boss, a boss at your job, you can say those things, like you can be like, hey boss, this is my office. You just dumped your shoes and all your dirt all over my office. Can you clean that up, please? And if your boss is a good boss and understands boundaries, he'll be like,
My bad.
you know what, I have my assistant do it, but it'll happen and he'll get it done.
Yeah.
Something like that, like I've had situations like that with my bosses where like something happened and I call them up and I'm like, hey man, this thing happened and I'm kind of upset about it and I need to talk about it. And they're like, because of the way I present it, but it's also because of the people that they are. I've
Yeah.
been able to surround myself with people and set up relationships in a way that we can work it out,
Well, I
and
think that's like, a really fantastic example of like the importance of boundaries, and the fact that like you started implementing these boundaries once you started going to therapy and you started realizing what was going on. And like you said earlier, basically a bunch of people just like, exited, and you realize that those are like toxic people. And then you place yourself in these other groups with around these other people that ended up having more of a positive influence and respected your boundaries, and we're like, oh, I respect the fact that you have emotions and you have feelings.
oh yeah, 100%. And that aspect of my life has continued to increase, and I've come across resources that continue to augment and expand and create abundance in that area, like especially the emotional support thing. There are times when they have to come to me and they're upset and I'm like, I have to listen to those, men and women in some cases where they're upset about something. If they're really pissed at me and they're coming at me with like negative energy, I go, you know what, I can't talk right now, let me know when you're a little more calm And sometimes it's like it ramps up even more. They're like, fuck you, motherfucker. And I'm just like, no, you're upset. And I'm not going to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm the reacting one, you
Yeah,
know,
but
but
it's everyone's allowed to have their reactions. Everyone's allowed to have their emotions. Anything that you feel is real,
yeah,
and you're completely valid in the way that you feel. But again, it comes down to, like you said, a very important thing is how you present yourself, how you communicate. So even though you may be extremely angry or upset, it's still no reason to go after someone verbally. And then, like you
yeah,
also pointed out, if you're that emotional in the moment, it's really difficult to get any kind of resolution because you're not. No one is able to have a logical discussion or have a rational discussion if they're so hyped up in whatever it is that they're feeling.
yeah, absolutely. And, you know, sometimes, you know, like when you're first doing this, you know, you don't have the skill set to like really come back and be calm, you know, like
Mhm.
you go away and you're thinking about this thing you're pissed off about for 20 minutes and you're, well, it's been 20 minutes. So, you know, now you're going to go back and fight it out some more. No, that's not how it works. You actually have to like get your mind off of that, do something else. There's technique that you have to continually
Mhm.
build, you know, and you have to add to it. It's not just like pulling out taffy and, you know, taking peanut butter and spreading it out all over the giant bread. You have to actually like buy more peanut butter. You
Yeah, no,
got to
yeah,
put
you
it,
have to constantly be working at it, and the
yeah,
fact
you
that
don't
like
want to,
the
sorry, go
fact
ahead.
I was gonna say like the fact that like we're constantly growing as people, we're constantly learning, we're constantly evolving as individuals. Like you have to take in the new data, the new experiences, and then throw that into what it is that you've already learned. So there's always going to be that growth aspect.
Yeah, 100%. The growth part, I've noticed that like it's very organic too. Sometimes you add a bunch of really cool stuff that doesn't work for you, you know, and like it's like putting a certain type of fertilizer in a certain type of soil. That soil doesn't grow that flower with that fertilizer. So you have to
Exactly.
find and tweak and calibrate, and then you find the right amount of like nitros or nitrogen that you add to that soil, and all of a sudden you have a giant growth spurt, you know, and
Yeah, it's like an avocado is not going to grow in Alberta, Canada, but it's going to, be amazing in Southern California. You're going to have some of the best avocados, on the planet, just saying.
yeah,
Also, I
exactly.
really love avocados.
Yeah, I love avocados, but I don't eat them because it makes my skin break
Oh, no.
out.
Well, anytime you get avocados with a meal, just give it to me and I'll eat them for you. I got your
Deal.
back.
But yeah, you know, it's been a really interesting experience, especially since I started Mankind Project, that the trajectory of growth just went.
Yeah, and also, just on a personal note, I want to say thank you for being such a supportive person in general. Because when I first started talking more openly about like my own anxiety, and like I shared that book, and I started talking about the fact that I was going to therapy for the first time
Yeah,
in my entire life, you were literally one of the first people to reach out to me like privately, like personally, and just kind of like talk to me and show support and just kind of express like how proud you were, and you shared some of like what you had gone through and like what you had worked through, and just for me that meant a lot because uh, for most of my life I had always had this uh I guess like feeling of like a taboo towards actually going to therapy, which is weird because like I've always made it like a personal mission, whether consciously or subconsciously, to like go out and help people.
yeah,
So it took a lot of inward reflection to make that decision on my end to go and see a therapist, and then even more so to be open about it, and just having people like yourself, like right off the bat, just be there and like show that love and show that support. It really, it meant a lot to me. So again, thank you very much
oh,
for that.
you're very welcome, man. You know, I know how hard it is to make yourself vulnerable enough to go and do that, and then to even mention it to anybody about it. You know, that's one of the reasons that therapists are bound by, you know,
Hmm.
uh
Law.
what's what's the word,
Confidentiality.
confidentiality. Thank you.
That one. You're welcome. That'll
and
be on the SAT test later.
and actually inside the Mankind Project, like, you know, the contents of someone's process, totally confidential, that we're not allowed to talk about any of that to anybody,
Mhm.
you know. And like I actually had an ex-girlfriend kind of give me shit about not sharing it. And I was just like,
You're like, I can't.
yeah, like, dude, no, I just told you that this is confidential, and what I realized, with that person, she had an issue where boundaries weren't allowed for her. So, and she always was forced to share things that she didn't want to share.
Mm.
And so
That's
when
something
she,
I think is also really important that like you brought up, and I really want to touch up on this one.
please,
The idea that subconsciously, I've just noticed that there's a lot of things where like women in general are taught not to have boundaries as well in certain situations where like they're taught
100%.
to they're taught to express themselves and have emotions and be emotional, but like they're also taught to like not have boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And like they're sometimes trained by society to neurotically express their emotions and not
Mm.
have a boundary for when is a good or safe time to express those emotions, or to express them to a safe person. Like women share their emotions and they get manipulated by men,
Yeah,
that are repressing their emotions, sometimes their emotions of like, anger about like what this person is telling them. And then it becomes,
it just becomes a really unhealthy back and forth. And
yeah,
this again is a good highlight of why boundaries are important for individuals. This way you can say, hey, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is how I can interact with you in a healthy
yeah,
manner. And it helps everyone uh, put themselves in dynamics with people that they get along with, people that are healthy for their dynamic, and it keeps people that would be toxic and unhealthy away from them and out of the loop, because those people are like, I don't want to deal with this boundary.
yeah. One of the things my I have a new female therapist, and we were talking about toxic masculinity, and she goes, oh yeah, women can have internalized toxic masculinity for sure. And I'm like,
Was
okay,
your
your
mind
woman's
blown?
saying, is that real? And because like they're taught those same societal expectations, and they sometimes internalize them and take them on as their own thing. And they'll be walking around, you know telling people to stop being a pussy. And it's like, wait a second, you know you told me that you wanted me to express my feelings, and then when I express them, you're saying, oh, why don't you just man up? And it's like, wait a second, that's even worse. Like that's even harder, because now like I'm trying to be emotional with this woman that I care about, or am working for, and they're telling me to man up. And it's like,
You're
wait,
like, they want you to express your feelings, but at the same time you're being told not to express your feelings.
yeah, exactly. And people run into, I mean, like, people of all ilks and types and sizes do the same thing. It's not just women. I want to make sure that
Yeah, no.
anything that I say that may have sounded stereotypical, I realize that
Yeah, no, it's
anybody is
definitely
capable.
not stereotypical, but like
Yeah,
it has been kind of ingrained into our culture to the point
yeah,
where like it comes off as stereotypical, and like that's kind of the dynamic that we're having, is the fact that like this is what we're taught, but it's not true.
yeah. And it doesn't have to be maintained anymore. Like we're going through like a very impressive cultural change right now, where like, especially in America, where well, what most people call minorities, but blacks, Latinos,
Mhm.
gays, any LGBTQ person is developing these rights. And there's a lot of like conflict around that, but yet it is growing. I know there's some people that feel like it's not changing, but man, when I was in high school, LGBTQ, black, Latinos, Asians, they did not have the rights they have now.
Which
Like,
that whole thing just blows my mind, and I think my perspective is just coming from the fact that like I grew up in a Jewish household with Jewish family. So like from the time I could recall like being cognizant, like the whole idea of like racism and, you know, like hating someone just because of, you know, their religion, their skin color, their beliefs. Like that whole idea was ingrained into me to be bad because of the Holocaust. It's like, oh, this is what happens when you let racism run around. It's like you turn into like mass murder and people getting shoved into ovens. So like from
Pretty
being a
much.
child, I was just like, oh, racism is bad. Don't do that. So like the
Yeah.
fact that like it's still an issue now, it's like, why is that a thing? Did like no one pay attention in history class? There's no way that every history class was so boring that everyone slept through it, that you missed everything about World War II and literally the mass murder of millions of people because of racism.
Yeah, I mean well, I'll tell you, like my grandmother, my maternal grandmother she lived the exact same life that Anne Frank lived, except she survived. She lived in a Gentile person's basement and escaped the Nazis in France. Like
Well,
when
I'm glad that she survived and that you're here.
and then there's like the other side, where, there are certain family members on my dad's side that there was a person that influenced them, that taught them that there's science around, hating blacks, and like the reason that they're less intelligent or whatever, all that stuff, the eugenics mentality from the early 20th century, and like that somehow, like, and that, the people like on that side of the family, and a lot of people in the South, and like, you know Maryland and Virginia, and like South Carolina and stuff at that time in life. I know things have changed a lot there, but
Mhm.
there's definitely more, openness to um to different races and stuff now. It's not the best it can be, but it's still there.
There's still change towards the positive.
Yeah, there's definitely been some growth in that area, but like, you know that stuff's everywhere, and I don't want to, like, wrongly accuse anybody, but it's been difficult to see, how long it takes when somebody is convinced at a very young age that being a different race is wrong, and it's bad, and it's unhealthy for the race that you're in. And it's like, whoa.
It's crazy like how much like what we learn as children like has an effect on us, like us having this conversation, the idea of toxic masculinity and all the things that happen to us as children. We pointed out that like what you saw as like normal behavior as a child, you recognized in other situations as being unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's crazy how strongly we latch on during those really like formative years.
Yeah, I actually kind of have like, uh, to me, what toxic masculinity sort of developed in for me was like a stunted growth. It
Mm,
was like unwillingness to learn, and even like continuing to preach that old message, like,
mhm.
sort of the mansplaining thing, where it's like, no, this is how I see things, and I'm the man, so I see it this way, and this is the way it is because I'm me. It's not necessarily because I'm a man, but I was taught, and this is the way it always is going to be, because
Yep.
that's what I was taught.
You're like, this
And
is the way I know it has to be right.
yeah, and that's an unwillingness to learn and see things in a different way. Like 101 ways to skin a cat, right? But a toxic masculine person only sees one,
And
and it's
refuse
their
to
way.
see any other way.
Yeah, and that's the, I don't, please, no animal activists, I don't mean I'm going to skin a cat, but um the but like that unwillingness to learn is a really huge highlight of like toxic masculinity. And I
And it's
think,
because you have to be strong, you have to be right. And if you even if you're wrong, like
yeah,
even that shows like that, you're weak. And like we're taught, not just men, but like women too, that like if anyone is wrong or if we fail at something, that that's bad, that's weakness. When in reality, it's like if you're wrong, it's like, okay, educate me. Or if you're wrong, you have an opportunity to learn and grow from there. This way you can continue to do better, you can continue to succeed, you can continue adding value to the world around you instead of just doing something wrong for the rest of your life and potentially doing harm to like those around you,
yeah,
to the world.
yeah. And like sort of like taking out the black and white thinking of right and wrong. It's like not everything is right and wrong. I mean, like there's
There's a
like,
lot of gray.
Yeah, it's like oxygen has one, you know, one neutron, one proton, right? Like that, or what? No, I can't remember which one that is, but like,
It has two
uh,
hydrogens, one no, it's water. Dirt, dirt,
yeah,
dirt. I was doing
yeah, but
H2O.
that's a fact. Water is H2O, like
Yeah,
that's a fact. There's a right and a wrong. You can't say H2O2 because that's peroxide.
yeah,
That's a fact. That's undisputable. There's a right and a wrong there. But interpersonal situations and getting jobs done and stuff like that, there's always room for variation
yeah.
and personal touch. Sometimes like if your job is to like, you know, make sure that your patients are safe, you don't make your, there's definitely a right and wrong. There's H2O and there's peroxide.
Yeah,
You
they're
can't
either
give,
alive or they're not alive.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You can't give peroxide to your patient to drink with their pills. That's
That's
wrong.
bad.
Yeah.
That
So,
will make them dead.
but learning to see things, and it's not as gray. It's like, I don't even think it's like, because that's in terms of like shades of black and white. There's a million colors in this world, and all the variations of red and magenta and, fuchsia and periwinkle and blues and grays and
Let's not forget green.
yeah, all the blending of all the colors in the color rainbow. Like that's how much variation there's room for in the sort of the typically black and white thinking. You're right, I'm wrong, or I'm right, you're wrong, whatever that is. There's like between here and here there's a million points. Sorry, I'm on
Yeah.
the screen. Between here and here there's a million potential points of change, and like, if you're looking at things on just a single strand, what if you're looking at things globally, like, and I mean, I'm not talking about the earth globally, I'm talking
you're,
about
you're you're just having like more of a perspective instead of like A or B or black or white, which
yeah.
is it's a very important point that you're bringing up, and I think that kind of just feeds into the mindset that's needed in order to break this idea of toxic masculinity and to kind of fight this whole idea of emotional repression.
Yeah, and I hope that anything I've said has been helpful, and I hope that anything I may have said is not hurtful to that growth potential. But if I was wrong about something, I hope that
Yeah.
um, I get to a chance to learn something new and have a conversation with somebody about it.
Well, I
And
think that everything that you've said has been very helpful. I think it's been very insightful. So thank you so much for taking the time to actually come here and have this conversation. Like I really do appreciate you taking the time and kind of sharing some of your more like intimate experiences.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely an honor to get to chat with you about this, because I know you're kind of going after the same thing, that healing, and growth.
yeah, and I truly believe that the more that we as a society feel comfortable opening up about our struggles, the more it'll help others to realize that they're not alone.
Yep, absolutely. And that, some of those relationships, if the person on the other end is strong enough, they can heal them, like most of my family issues that I have, that I've talked about from my childhood have been healed, and had growth in those relationships, you know, and called out some people about appropriate things, and when they were ready and when I was ready, when I was ready to explain it in a way that was helpful to them, they were able to see it. And
And in a productive manner.
yeah, exactly. Not just like, you did this and you're a bitch or you're a dick or whatever, none of that shit.
Yeah. So just more examples as to the importance of being able to communicate and the power of communication. So Brandon, thank you again for taking the time to chat. And thank you everyone that has taken the time to watch this episode. So if anyone out there who has been watching this finds that they are struggling with their mental health, please do not be afraid to reach out to your friends, to your family, or a mental health professional. I'll place a link in the description of this video that will have some information and ways to connect with professionals and further resources. So again, it'll be in the bottom in the description of this video. So until next time, remember, that you have the strength to conquer your battlefield.